Okay, so today we're going to begin reading through the book of Numbers. This is a follow-up book after Leviticus. This begins to tell the story of the Israelites leaving Mount Sinai and heading towards the Promised Land. Numbers is a kind of an interesting book. I believe, from what I understand, its original Hebrew name amounted to something like "in the wilderness." We call it Numbers because of all the numbers in it. It has a lot of numbers in it. They take two huge military censuses in this book, and so that alone provides a lot of numbers. And there are others numbers in the book too. It's a lot like Exodus. This book is actually a lot like Exodus in that it has some narrative and some instructions, other stuff. It restates some of the laws from Leviticus. In some cases, it adds a little bit more information and detail to those laws. Kind of like how Exodus itself started the process of giving the laws to the people. And we got the Ten Commandments in Exodus and a handful of other laws. Then Exodus itself, as we saw when we read through it, is broken into two major sections. Literally halves, the first half and the second half. The first half is a story, a narrative about them leaving Egypt. The second half is mostly a set of instructions. Some has to do with their laws. A lot of it has to do with instructions for how to build their tabernacle and the Ark of the Covenant and the various other items that get used in their ritual worship services at the tabernacle. Of course, Leviticus itself was mainly centered on the tabernacle and the various sacrifices and offerings and customs that they conducted there, and the feast days that centered there, the national feast days where they were all supposed to gather there, and of course the purity laws that people were supposed to follow when they were out and about on their daily lives away from the tabernacle. Numbers has a little bit of that. It also has a narrative, and it has, of course, long lists of numbers. Not all of Numbers is exciting reading to us today. Some of this is going to be very, very dry. I'm not even sure if I'm going to read through all of it out loud. Some of it I may abbreviate, because there are going to be long lists of numbers that really don't have a whole heck of a lot of meaning to us today. So Numbers has a little bit of everything in it. Numbers is not arranged chronologically. Okay, we're going to see right away the material at the very beginning of Numbers happens after some of the material that is included later on. There's also going to be a big time skip in the middle of Numbers where they actually, about 40 years or so, just kind of pass in the blink of an eye without almost any acknowledgement of it. So you have to be careful with the chronology of Numbers too, because it's not straightforward. It seems like it's fairly easy to follow, and it is, as long as you pay attention. But on its own, Numbers is not written in order, even if it might give you that impression when you first start reading it. And it's not hard to keep track of, but you do have to keep track of it. You do have to stay on your toes, because it will switch the timeline around on you very abruptly as the book goes on. And this is a clue that the Old Testament narratives, the Old Testament in general, do not have chronology as their primary focus. And that's something that we just have to accept and understand. Now in Genesis, generally, that was written from start to finish. That was written more or less in a timeline, with a few branches here and there, kind of giving information on things like the line of Esau or something, or the line of Ishmael, kind of going down beyond the timeline. But for the most part, Genesis is a narrative and is written fairly straightforwardly. The first half of Exodus is a narrative and is written fairly straightforwardly, although, as I said at the time, it utilizes a lot of kind of flashbacks and flash forwards in it, where it will stop talking about something and talk about something that had happened earlier to help explain what's going on right now, and that's just kind of something you have to be aware of. And Numbers kind of does that too. It jumps around a lot in the timeline. It doesn't start at the beginning, okay, because later chapters will talk about stuff that happened before the earlier chapters do, and even later on it's going to kind of jump around in the timeline, and it's not too hard to keep track of, not like it will be later on in the days of the prophets, when the prophets really will just kind of jump around wherever they see fit, and It's not going to be quite like that, but it is still a clue that this Old Testament Hebrew writing just is not. It is not as concerned about chronology as we probably are today, or as we would like it to be today. You have to remember again, this is stuff that they would have been reading over and over and over again. Okay, this is just. I said it before, and I'll say it again. You just have to remember that these. We wanted to arrange it like in linear fashion from start to finish, and the text just doesn't really allow for that, like we would like it to. And it's not supposed to be read that way. Okay, it's not. It's not supposed to be read that way. It's not supposed to be read from beginning to end. And it's not like one of our books, so we read it from beginning to end and put it down and we move on to another book. Like it's supposed to be something you cycle through constantly. It's one of the reasons why I think also there's so much repetition in it. The smart people today will tell you that there's so much repetition because it's 2 or 3 documents that have been pasted together. So the reason why things get stated 2 or 3 times each is because it was literally written down 2 or 3 times at different points in history, and then later on was kind of stitched together like a jigsaw puzzle. And I don't think that's true either. I think it's just written that way because it's supposed to be said over and over again. It's emphasizing the cyclical, repetitive nature of it. Anyway, moving on, starting with the book of Numbers. The Lord spoke to Moses in the tent of meeting in the desert of Sinai. And I remember at the end of Exodus. Now, Leviticus kind of halted the narrative. We haven't really made any progress now since the end of Exodus, timeline-wise. At the end of Exodus, Moses, let's see here, in Exodus 40, verse 33, Moses set up the courtyard around the tabernacle and altar and put up the curtain at the entrance to the courtyard. This is after he's built. The Israelite craftsmen made all this stuff, and then Moses puts it all together. And so Moses finished the work. Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. This is pretty much where we still are, pretty much. We had the whole thing with Leviticus. Leviticus, more or less, we've been kind of frozen in place here. Leviticus had a little bit of narrative in it with the consecration of the priests. But that happened during that time, that year they were spending at Mount Sinai. So we haven't actually moved the story forward at all. So the Lord spoke to Moses in the tent of meeting in the desert of Sinai on the first day of the 2nd month of the 2nd year after the Israelites came out of Egypt. Now later on, a few chapters, we're going to go back to the 1st month. So this stuff is taking place after the events that are going to be recorded starting in number 7 and going on from there. So the first 3 chapters of this book took place after the next batch of chapters in actual history, in actual time. So here's what he's saying to them. This is the 2nd month of the 2nd year. Take a census of the whole Israelite community by their clans and families, listing every man by name, one by one. You and Aaron are to number by their divisions all the men in Israel 20 years old or more who are able to serve in the army. So their age of military conscription was 20. One man from each tribe, each the head of his family, is to help you. These are the names of the men who are to assist you. From Reuben, remember these are the tribes of Israel here, so from the tribe of Reuben, Elazar, son of Shedeur. From the tribe of Simeon, Shelumiel, son of Zurishaddai. From the tribe of Judah, and we skipped Levi. Levi should go in the middle there after Simeon, but we skipped him. Keep that in mind. From the tribe of Judah, Nashon, son of Aminadab. From the tribe of Issachar, Nethanel, son of Zuar. From the tribe of Zebulun, Eliab, son of Helon. From the sons of Joseph, remember Joseph got split into 2 tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. From Ephraim, Elishama, son of Ammihud. From Manasseh, Gamaliel, son of Pedazur. From Benjamin, Abidan, son of Gideoni. From Dan, Ahiezer, son of Ammishaddai. From Asher, Pagiel, son of Okran. These are some names, aren't they? From Gad, Eliasaph, son of Duel, and from Naphtali, Ahira, son of Enon. We're still arranging the tribes of Israel according to their mothers. We're not arranging them in the strict order of their births. We're still arranging them according to their mothers, clumping them together according to their mothers. These are the men appointed from the community, the leaders of their ancestral tribes. They were the heads of the clans of Israel. Now, this is something that we often struggle with, and I'll admit I struggle with. Okay, so it's a very tribal society, very family society, clans, heads of clans, okay. We have some element of this still in our culture, in our family lines, in our heads of household. I can't even really tell you the distinction between some of these things, but they would have mattered a great deal to these people. Moses and Aaron took these men whose names had been given, and they called the whole community together on the first day of the second month. The people indicated their ancestry by their clans and families. And the men 20 years old, so you have basically a tribe, a clan, a family. I guess that kind of breaks down. You have the tribes, which date back to the original 12 sons of Jacob, and then the clans, and then the families. I guess each unit gets a little bit more specific as it goes. The people indicated their ancestry by their clans and families, and the men 20 years old or more were listed by name, one by one, as the Lord commanded Moses. And so he counted them in the desert of Sinai. Now, 20 obviously is the minimum age threshold for military age men in this culture, in this country. I don't know if there is a retirement age where men were no longer to be called for military service. It doesn't say that. There's no cutoff point. Now, later on, there will be a cutoff age given. 50 years old will be the mandatory retirement age for men who are in certain kinds of service to the Lord and the priests and around the tabernacle. We'll read about that as we get there. It does not say here, however, that you're only numbering the men between 20 and 50. So I don't know if there was a mandatory retirement age for men in terms of military service. My guess is that they probably wouldn't have called the older men to fight if they didn't have to. You know, you wouldn't have called the 50-plussers, 60-plussers out into the battlefield unless you were really desperate for numbers. My guess is that. That's my guess, but I don't know. There's no indication that there was a limit to the age. Because there was a ceiling, a floor. There was a minimum, a bottom. You had to be 20, which is about what you have to be today. We've lowered the age for military service today down to 18. It used to be 21. So it's about the same. Now later on, again, we're going to find out that you couldn't actually enter. You really weren't a true adult at age 20. But you were physically developed enough to be a fighter, be trained as a fighter, and used as a fighter at age 20. From the descendants of Reuben, the firstborn son of Israel, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name. So there does say able to serve in the army. So there could have been some men 20 years old or more who were not able to serve in the army. It doesn't specify what those conditions were that made them unable to serve. Maybe they had a physical handicap. Maybe they were crippled. Maybe they only had one arm. Maybe they were too old. Maybe they're too old and feeble. I don't know. It doesn't say what conditions there were that made them unable to serve in the army. But it does say here, these are the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army, indicating that there were men of that age range who were not for some reason. One by one, according to the records of their clans and families, the number from the tribe of Reuben was 46,500. From the descendants of Simeon, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were counted and listed by name, one by one, according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Simeon was 59,300. So he had more than Reuben. From the descendants of Gad, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name, according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Gad was 45,650. From the descendants of Judah, it sounds like these numbers are being rounded off. From the descendants of Judah, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name, according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Judah was 74,600. From the descendants of Issachar, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name, according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Issachar was 54,400. From the descendants of Zebulun, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name, according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Zebulun was 57,400. From the sons of Joseph, from the descendants of Ephraim, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name, according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Ephraim was 40,500. From the descendants of Manasseh, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name, according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Manasseh was 32,200. That's actually about the smallest number we've seen so far. Manasseh and Ephraim will end up becoming very powerful, however. Those numbers are small compared to the other tribes at this point in time. But Manasseh and Ephraim will end up becoming two of the biggest tribes and most powerful later on. From the descendants of Benjamin, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name, according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Benjamin was 35,400. From the descendants of Dan, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name, according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Dan was 62,700. We're almost done, only two left. From the descendants of Asher, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name, according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Asher was 41,500. From the descendants of Naphtali, all the men 20 years old or more who were able to serve in the army were listed by name, according to the records of their clans and families. The number from the tribe of Naphtali was 53,400. These are the men counted by Moses and Aaron and the 12 leaders of Israel, each one representing his family. All the Israelites 20 years old or more who were able to serve in Israel's army were counted according to their families. The total number was 603,550. Again, that's probably rounded off. There is a possibility that this is a deliberate exaggeration. One of the potential, a lot of people have a trouble with that 600,000 number. Because if there's 600,000 men of military age, that means there's probably 2 million plus people in the entire camp. Because this is not including any of the women, it's not including anybody under the age of 20, and it's also not including however many men who are over the age of 20 who are unable to fight, possibly elderly or infirm in general. So if you consider this would be less than half of their population overall, because there are no females being included here, no children being included here, and potentially no males not a fighting form being included here, we're talking about a total camp probably of 2 million plus. Some people have a problem with that. I don't really know if that is a problem, frankly. It doesn't really bother me. This number itself doesn't really bother me. But some people do have a problem with that number. One of the things we need to consider is that that number may be deliberately exaggerated. In ancient records and ancient literature, deliberately, purposely exaggerating a number by a symbolic amount, such as 7 or 10, was considered okay. It was considered okay. Now, in our way of understanding it today, that doesn't make sense. We have a hard time with the idea that the number could be deliberately exaggerated and still be inerrant, as we define inerrancy. First of all, it may not be. It may not be exaggerated. That's just a possibility. We really don't know. There is going to be a number coming up later on, which is going to be incongruous with this number, so there has to be, and I will explain that when we get there. There's some kind of trick in the counting going on somewhere or another. It could be that the number is being inflated, and it could be that it was being deliberately inflated, and that in their minds and their culture, this was not a problem. It may be a problem to us. That may threaten what we consider to be the doctrine of inerrancy. But that's our problem. That's not the text problem. That's just us clinging to a doctrine that we've defined as such, as in such a way that we can't allow for this sort of issue to occur. But that's not because the text doesn't have it. It's because that we can't accept it. But there may not be an exaggeration here. That may be. I mean, it is clearly being rounded off. There's no way all 12 of these tribes just happen to come to a round number of the nearest 10 or 50 or 100. Okay, clearly these are being rounded off, but whether or not they're being exaggerated, who knows? Seriously, it's a possibility, and we shouldn't dismiss it just because we don't. It makes us uncomfortable because we cling to this notion of inerrancy that we've defined. But that doesn't mean it is exaggerated. It just means it's a possibility. The families of the tribe of Levi, however, were not counted along with the others. So we skipped him for a reason. The Lord had said to Moses, "You must not count the tribe of Levi or include them in the census of the other Israelites." So they're not going to be part of the army. Instead, appoint the Levites to be in charge of the tabernacle of the testimony, over all its furnishings and everything belonging to it. They are to carry the tabernacle and all its furnishings. They are to take care of it and encamp around it. Whenever the tabernacle is to move, the Levites are to take it down, and whenever the tabernacle is to be set up, the Levites shall do that. Anyone else who goes near it shall be put to death. We're going to get more specifics about these instructions a few chapters from now. The Israelites are to set up their tents by division, each man in his own camp under his own standard. It's basically a flag. I don't know if it exactly was a flag by our standards of flags. When they talk about your standard, it's like a banner. It's something resembling a flag. Again, I don't know if it's exactly a flag as we think of a flag, but it's pretty close to that. The Levites, however, are to set up their tents around the tabernacle of the testimony so that the wrath will not fall on the Israelite community. The Levites are to be responsible for the care of the tabernacle of the testimony. The Israelites did all this just as the Lord commanded Moses.